1, 2, 3. Hello, everybody. My name is Christina Podnar. I'm the XRSI Global Digital Policy Expert. It's good to be with all of you today, and welcome. I've been thinking a lot what's been changing in my life over the last few months, and I have to tell you, about maybe 2 months ago, my 67-year-old mother asked me to explain to her what the Metaverse thing was that Mark Zuckerberg was talking about. I had to think through that one a bit, because if your mom's anything like my mom, you know she's not very technical. She makes a really good pasta sauce. It's funny because I realized today, as we've held roundtables on data classifications, we had a wonderful event right before this one hosted by our friends over at EFF and Access Now. And what became apparent is that really nobody has the perfect two-line definition that is relatable and stable. The definition seems to change depending on whom you ask. Well, over here at XRSI, we can go to the next slide, please, Matt. Thank you. At XRSI, we talk about the metaverse as the convergence of several enabling technologies and experiences, bringing together AR, VR, 5G, AI, edge networks, improved graphics. Of course, you can't do anything without good computer hardware, and of course, improved mobile device capabilities. That's a lot of technologies, some more mature than others, and we don't necessarily have a clear roadmap for each one of them. The lessons learned around breaking simple technologies over the past 30 years since the web was invented and being able to do significant harm, we ought to be asking ourselves what will come with the metaverse. The problem with the metaverse is that the same qualities that make each of these technologies a potentially revolutionary thing also make it a deeply dangerous one, more dangerous than anything we have experienced in digital to date. And so at XRSI, we believe that we absolutely must start asking some basic questions. Things like, how is this going to impact our social lives and society? What are the intended consequences and risks, maybe things that we don't actually understand today? And how do we properly balance the risks and opportunities, because we recognize there is a space for digital, we have to embrace it, but we also have to be mindful and cautious in some instances so that we can deliberately choose the path forward. So one of the things that I wanted to point out is really XRSI's understanding of the real world challenges that the metaverse will present, because as we go forward, we're going to be impacting humans globally. Addressing these challenges proactively is going to be significantly important in order to safely navigate the metaverse. And as you can see on the slide, right, from diversity and inclusion to accessibility and the digital divide, privacy and anonymity, safety and security, not to mention things like standards and interoperability, the metaverse presents endless opportunities, but also conceivable risks to citizen and society at large. I personally feel overwhelmed sometimes, and frankly, I've had days actually beyond my mother where I start to feel deflated. I see these press releases, products and services where it doesn't seem like anybody cares about accessibility or other things that I've cared about for years. And it's obvious that not only are many companies not thinking through the potentially negative impacts of what they're going to build, but frankly, they don't have the capacity to understand the implications. And I want to say that that's not by fault of their own, right? We don't know what we don't know. And so nobody's trying to do bad things. It just happens because we don't know better, and we can't be deliberate unless we know more. And so I want to call that out, because here's the thing. It's too early to feel disillusioned, and this is not the time to actually give up, right? So at XRSI, we believe that there is a solution. We actually are optimistic. We think that not only is there a way forward, but we think we actually have to be part of that way forward right now. And that's why today XRSI is excited to announce that we've created the Metaverse Reality Check, a global board for and by citizens. The MRC, as we're going to call it, in our essential term, has already been chartered and is ready to get to work. We're already partnering with industry. We've been supporting several governments and with individuals to build that metaverse that we can all be a part of and support is where we're heading. We're very excited. We hope you'll actually join us in this excitement as we look to what's next. As we wrap up XR Safety Week, a week that's been a wonderful celebration, and we celebrate Human Rights Day today, We want you to know, and we want everybody to know, that we care, understand the questions we need to ask, and how choices should be made. We believe that none of us can afford to be passive. We believe that it will take all of us to hold developers, entities, regulators, and each other's accountable for building a metaverse safe and accessible and inclusive and respectful of citizens and society. But moreover, we believe that XRSI, and especially the MRC, have a very special role to play. It's actually a role of support and enablement, right? We don't want to wag our fingers at people. We want to support, we want to enable, we want to build towards something that's really good and very positive. So we're really looking at ourselves as a partner for industry, for individuals, and really for society. And what we're doing is saying, come do this with us. We're not alone. You're not alone. We get it. We have a path forward, and we can all bound together and make something awesome happen. So step away from today knowing that we're not just ready to hold individuals and entities accountable for building a safe metaverse. We've already started. In front of you, as you can see on the screen, you actually have the founding members for the Metaverse Reality Check. We're proud to say that we've already began to partner, working with the organizations, as I mentioned. What's interesting is, as we look past the holidays and head into January, the MRC will issue its first advisory. We will continue to gain velocity in this important work, and we won't stop because we understand that it's too important for us to give up. We're not there yet. We have to just start the good fight, and we hope that you'll join us with your enthusiasm for the next phase of what awaits us. So together with my colleagues at XRSI, I hope that you'll join in this great initiative. Consider joining the MRC. We have different levels of involvement because we know and understand that people have day jobs, you have families, you have things beyond the metaverse and safety to worry about. But each one of you has unique talents, unique experience, unique perspective. And it's really important we join all of those perspectives and insights together because we have a number of capacities in which we can make a difference. Whatever you do, don't be passive. We need a metaverse reality check. We need each other, and we definitely need every one of you. So please join us as we welcome the next chapter and continue the important work that XRSI has been doing for years through this new initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. And we just have one statement from Senator Mark Warner, and thereafter we will commence this first virtual citizenship forum.
Hi, I'm Virginia Senator Mark Warner, and I'd like to welcome you all to the Extended Reality Safety Week. And I really appreciate all of the leaders of new immersive technologies coming together to talk about safety. For those of you who don't know me, my background for 20 years was in the technology sector before I got into politics. I was involved in the very early days of the wireless technology, created Nextel, became a venture capitalist. So in a place that doesn't have a lot of tech expertise, I'm known in the US Senate as one of the tech guys. I also know why I think the XR Safety Week is so important. In many cases, I think about the emergence of our various platforms, social media platforms. In many ways, having no guardrails, maybe at first, the first 15 or 20 years made some sense. But what we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years is not having any guardrails on social media has exposed the dark underbelly of social media. And now Congress and the country is rushing to try to catch up. I have a lot of faith and belief that in these new immersive technologies, augmented reality, extended reality, other areas offer great, great potential. But I also think it's smart that we think about notions like privacy, notions like some level of buying in the public on the front end to both the upside and the potential downsides in these new technologies. We think about this before this new set of technologies are fully immersed into our society. So I applaud all of the efforts. I'm going to look forward to what's coming out of these discussions. I hope you'll turn to me as a senator that can assist both the potential of these new extended reality technologies, but also how we can make sure we get it right from the front end. Thanks so much.
All right. Wow. Hello, everybody. My name is Kent Bai, and I'm happy to be hosting today. This is the first ever virtual citizenship forum on Human Rights Day. So on this day back in 1948, so December 4th, 1948, that's when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was first signed and adopted by the United Nations. And so today we're going to be talking about different issues around human rights, whether that's neuro rights or responsible innovation, all these XR technologies, and how we can be in right relationship with not only the technology, but those that are around us. So my name's Kent Bai. I do the Voices of VR podcast, and I've been covering a lot of these different issues since 2016, I'd say, covering different issues around privacy, ethics, and yeah, I know that Kavya has been alongside doing this XRSI and all these other safety initiatives, and I'm really happy that this group of people have been able to be gathered today to be able to have a discussion. And so maybe what would be a good place to start is if you could each introduce yourself and kind of your orientation, maybe a bit about your background and your context for, if you're a lawyer, if you're someone who's from the background of human rights, if you're looking from a technology perspective or community perspective, or if you are, speaking on behalf of a company or on behalf of yourself. So maybe you could just sort of go down the line and just introduce yourself in a bit more context as to your orientation, and if you have any other opening things you'd like to say. Why don't we just go down the line here and start with Christina.
So hi again, everybody. Christina Podnat, obviously. You heard my voice already. I am a digital policy consultant, and my role in life is to help organizations, big, small, understand the risk and the opportunities that digital presents and have them practice digital in more deliberate ways. So really making sure that they understand what they're doing has certainly advantages, but it also might lead to disadvantages in finding the right balance for everybody. And so a little bit of technical, a little bit of business, and a little bit of legal all thrown in the pot mixed together, and that's what you get.
China, go ahead.
I think that means me. Hello, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here. My name is China Mcrae. I am a senior program manager at Microsoft in the mixed reality department, specifically in experience development. I'm also the co-chair of Black at Microsoft within mixed reality, focused on building community, thinking about inclusion when it comes to our products, as well as just fostering awesome talent in the org. What brought me here today is a lovely conversation with Kavya a few weeks ago, where we just talked about what it meant to build this next version of everything, and making sure that people can bring their whole selves and feeling safe and secure in that shared space. So thank you for having me.
Little Bagel.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lil Bagel. I've been working in the last 2 years deep within the Metaverse's communities, watching basically businesses grow and stuff like that within the Metaverse. It's been a really cool perspective and something to be a part of. More specifically, I help right now multiple convention centers inside of the virtual space. I've helped them expand globally into the West with some of their efforts, and I've just seen these kinds of economies grow, and I'm really interested in today's topic. So when I was invited today to come here, I was extremely excited to talk about these sorts of things. And it's just been a wild ride, and I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Hi, everyone. Matthew Kurbis. Happy to be here. I am, at least in my day job, primarily a civil litigation attorney involved with cases relating to insurance fraud. So what does that have to do with the Metaverse? Well, not much, but my journey on thinking about law in the Metaverse started about 7-8 months ago, where I decided to educate myself on all things blockchain and the future of the Metaverse, and thinking about the role that I can play as a legal mind in that future. So again, just like everyone else, really happy to be here and to participate in today's conversation.
Brian Wassam. I also am a litigation attorney. I've been practicing for 20 years. I have been involved in this industry now for the past 10 years. Most of that time blogging at a blog called augmentedlegality.com. Elsevier published my book, Augmented Reality Law, Privacy and Ethics, a few years back. And I've had just really fun opportunities and engaging opportunities to represent companies in this space, do some litigation around protecting the rights of speech in augmented reality medium, and helping companies get their legal footing in this space. So I just am happy to be a part of the team, part of the industry, and helping and moving people forward. And I'm looking forward to the conversation as well.
Hi, I'm Fox O'Nia. I spent 12 and a half years working at NASA doing data visualization and simulation design. I left to co-found Vault2 Technologies with the focus toward democratizing information and helping workers essentially get jobs using immersive experiences and immersive technologies. I joined XRSI a few years ago and now co-chair the Privacy Framework Working Group. Very happy to be involved and love the idea of being so thoughtful about the development of these radical new technologies and really thinking about humans first in the development of this tech.
Thanks, Fox, and thanks everyone who's assembled here. I'm Kavya Perlman. Most of you and some of you may have seen me around during the entire week. This is an effort from XRSI. I'm the founder and CEO of XRSI, together with Marco, who you see up there, like holding the camera like a deity. So Marco Magnano, myself, and of course in the audience we also have April Boy-Nerona, who is also our executive. So all of us, along with these multidisciplinary experts who graciously donate their time and bring together these multidisciplinary panels, knowledge, research, we are really just trying to pursue a singular mission, which is to help build safe and inclusive XR ecosystems, which AKA now we all know can potentially, give rise to the emergence of the new metaverse. So thank you for having me. And I'm so delighted that we have people from Microsoft, from Meta, from various communities, legal experts. So this is going to be a great discussion. Thank you so much for joining us.
I think that just leaves me. My name is Rochelle Mcferry, and I look after policy for Reality Labs over at Meta. And I'm really grateful to be here because it's conversations like these that help us understand what the community wants and how we can build for our portion of the metaverse in a more responsible way.
Awesome. Yeah, and Fox and Rochelle, I think you might need to amplify your voice if you haven't already, just on the host tools. So we have a nice range of folks here from different backgrounds and, some legal perspectives and from industry and community. And I think I want to start with asking around what you see as like the most highly leveraged or most crucial thing that needs to happen in order to, the most highly leveraged thing that can happen in order to protect the most people from your perspective. I'll start with one. I think neuro rights and protecting aspects of right to mental privacy, the right to identity, the right to agency. I think from Raphael Yusta in the Morningstar group have put forth a series of human rights. They're trying to blend together aspects of neurotechnologies and human rights to the point of like once those are declared, then those need to potentially get honed down into law, because I think there's still a lot of open loops when it comes to privacy. For me, that's the thing that I look at. But I'd be very curious to hear from each of your own perspectives what you see is either going to be most highly leveraged thing in terms of responsible innovation, human rights, digital rights, or other things that you're tracking in terms of preventing harm on the metaverse.
And I know we could start with Rochelle, perhaps, especially from Meta.
Sure. I think, like I said before, did I amplify it correctly? Can folks hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, great.
That's good.
I think when we think about how we prioritize, we most recently, about a month ago, a month and a half now, when we signaled sort of a new way of working, we outlined 4 priority areas: safety and integrity, privacy, equity and inclusion and access, and economic opportunity. We think between focusing on those and the investments that we make in external programs and initiatives that help us learn what we do not yet know, we'll be able to collectively bring that knowledge back to the community and build in a responsible way. It's early days yet. I don't think one company should do it alone, but we really are focused on making sure as we build, as we learn from each other, as we make investments, they are all in line with making sure that we're taking community first and a people first approach.
Adios, neighbor.
Yeah, I don't know if the lawyers want to jump in terms of this intersection between, like, if you've been tracking human rights and digital rights, and how you see if there's going to be things that, from a legal perspective, that will need to happen either at an international law level, or if you see these types of digital rights or human rights are going to start to come in, say, through local laws within the United States, and it becomes a matter of local policy from a government level. Just curious to hear some of your initial thoughts as you've been tracking the legal landscape of where you see either action or need for more work or attention.
I think that the economic, the financial side of things needs some attention. I know we're focused really on human rights and individual rights here, but that really, I think, cuts to the heart of what people are going to be concerned about protecting, which is their economic security as they engage in commerce online, or they open up their bank accounts, their crypto wallets, however it is they're going to be engaging in commerce online. And the platform is only going to be developed to the extent that corporations are willing to invest in it. They're only going to be able to invest in it if they can get a return on their investment. And that's only going to happen if individuals feel comfortable and safe conducting transactions on the internet, in the metaverse rather. So I think that the underlying economic infrastructure and the security, the reliability of that infrastructure is something that we might not think about so much as an individual right, but I think is going to be crucial for individuals to have a safe experience online.
Which then you have to think about, to just, dovetail off that, what happens when somebody's, economic, rights are infringed on, where are they located? What jurisdiction applies? What laws in the physical world should be applied to what happens, in the digital metaverse in that situation? And then enforcement issues that come up, which is how do you, depending on where is somebody located, number one, jurisdiction, and then how, if you could figure that out, how do you enforce, if there's, if somebody violates somebody's rights or, commits some kind of fraud, how do you go about solving that problem from an enforcement perspective? And if you're within a fully walled garden, I suppose then, Meta or whatever walled garden you're looking at, they might be able to engage in some kind of enforcement. But then when you're outside of that, controlled environment, I think there's going to be significant enforcement issues with any sort of violation.
And before we hop on, I wanted to just invite Oz into the conversation. Oz, I think you might have blooped out right when we were doing introductions. Maybe you could introduce yourself and give a little bit more context as to your background and your work in XR relative to the topic today.
Can you guys hear me?
You might need to amplify your voice under host tools.
Megaphone. And Kent, we have another speaker join us. Scott, if you are here, could you come up to the stage? Because I see that you're somewhere in the audience.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah,
yes,
that's better.
we can hear you.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I apologize. I'm on a JetBlue plane right now, so this is the first time I've tried connecting while I'm in a plane to Old Space, which is quite funny. My name's Oz Salt, and I've worked inside of gaming for about 17 years. I've also been involved. national politics and the development of blockchain policy, as well as privacy policy for a long period of time. I'm also a district leader in Harlem in New York City. When Kavya invited me to this, I thought this was really important because one of the biggest issues that I've been looking at over the course of the past couple of years is when we start thinking about the metaverse and we start thinking about NFT-based companies just jumping in and large-scale gaming enterprises coming in, there's a tremendous amount of data collection that's going on that's not just behavioral, but it's also psychological. And there's a need for not just an educated standard bodies to really kind of come up and set kind of the parameters of how we can protect not just the folks that are entering the metaverse right now, but the burgeoning growth that we're going to see inside of Generation Z, the generation behind them who are early tweens right now. This is going to mean as it starts going into a global explosion. Because if you think about this and you look back to 1998, let's just talk about crypto, right? The crypto community has hit maybe 100 years. So we're at 100 million people inside of just the internet around 1998. So when you start thinking about where we are with the number of platforms that are going to start connecting together, and I'm advising a couple of projects that are literally building new metaverses, going to be connecting them to PlayStation and Xbox and the Switch. There's a tremendous amount of data that's going to be out there, and there's huge. And if we don't actually think about how we can put this together now and start working with legislators in a meaningful fashion, we're going to have a sort of terrible 20s and 30s where large corporations start knowing who you are and can influence not just your behavior, but your personality and how you consume. And where we move future forward.
Well, I think we got probably around 75 to 80% of what you said. There was some parts that dropped off, but I think we got most of it. So it's
yeah,
pretty wild.
I apologize. Like I'm trying to do this from a plane.
So I think we got most of it. And
thank you so much for the opportunity to speak.
Very cool. Maybe Kavya, I'd be very curious to hear what you're focusing on in terms of, like what you see as maybe the most highly leveraged point where, or the most need for work that needs to be done in terms of, this initiatives of either responsible innovation or human rights, digital rights, or what you're focusing on for XRSI or you personally.
So if you want me to be really, really honest, I'm focusing on concluding this week. Because I started to run with the mission to bring everybody together almost like 3 months ago. First 2 months were in Europe, starting from Milan, right around the same time Facebook's Ray-Ban glasses had just come out. And then so some regulators in Italy sent their inquiry to Ireland, and a lot of things happened because of it for bystander privacy. Multiple discussions started to take place. So some influence there. Thereafter, made my way to several different European countries, to Berlin, Germany, Berlin, to Switzerland. Spoke with some politicians there in the parliament. So I've just been like dragging my suitcase from one hotel to another airport to another. It sounds fun, but it was very challenging. I even got mugged during that time, and right that time, Facebook's stories glasses came out, and I was thinking, where are those damn glasses when you need them? Because I was looking down on my phone, and somebody just snatched my phone. So I feel like a new perspective emerged with my travels that, these new gadgets could potentially maybe even make people safer. The only thing we ought to be able to trust these devices and the potential owner of whoever holds our data and whoever takes our data. So I feel like we can go from heads down culture to heads up culture, especially if it's, I come from India. As a woman in India or in other countries, if you're looking down, you're losing your awareness. So it really aids towards safety if we have these better interfaces. The only issue is, can we trust them? So that's the whole thing. And then right after that 2 months, tour with various different countries, with Denmark and stuff that I finished, I went to Augmented World Expo where Kent, you were right there, and a lot of the stakeholders were there, just to be able to understand, first of all, meet people in person, and then potentially understand what are the new technologies and what are the new stakeholders, and just inform them. That's where I met a lot of the XRSI folks. And right after that, I went to Orlando to then deliver what Christina just shared, the anatomy of the metaverse, the global concerns of the metaverse, and how we can use XRSI frameworks to solve some of those concerns to all the 6 branches of the military, including Space Force. And that was quite highly welcomed. And we are currently, even advising some of the contractors for Air Force, and a couple of folks from Navy and the chief scientist officer from the military have reached out to XRSI. So these are all great things. And then happens our, XR Safety Week, where the whole idea is really just to bring the communities, regulators. We heard from Julie Inman-Grant, the eSafety Commissioner of Australia, NHS. We heard from, those folks. And it's just been a wonderful community effort, and lots of community events happened. This morning, EFF did the human rights events, and that was fantastic. And then, of course, Kent is always, just leading the charge on expressing, creating awareness. So really grateful to have us all here, regulators, big tech industries, all of you guys. And the main purpose to create this virtual citizenship forum is that sometimes when companies make decisions, because the trade-offs will be made, privacy for safety or surveillance for, creating non-harassment space, that kind of stuff. But when these decisions are made, people feel powerless. And we just don't want to feel powerless. Especially a person in Iran or China or other countries may feel powerless because these policies are just US-centric. And this is precisely why, Christina, I'm so honored, and all of these folks that you displayed, Oz is a part of it, Scott Butler is a part of it, and Fox is part of all this. And we have now another massive advocate for us, Laurie Segal, who has started a Media. So we are all coming together just so we could stay ahead of these things and people don't feel powerless. And so the main mission today is to hear from you and at least start a conversation, which is not speaking at you, but listening to you. And that's the whole thing that we are after now. And right after this is done, I'm taking like a whole week off.
Yeah, well, this has been a monumental effort to be able to put all this together, and lots of different people from across the industry. So congratulations, this is the finish line in some ways. So after this, then I'm sure you'll be celebrating. But as we continue on the conversation here, I just want to also reflect that, in my travels throughout all the different conferences since I started in 2014, these conversations end up emerging from the community. And I think it's so important to hear different perspectives from the community, because there's so many different things that no one individual can identify all the ethical and moral dilemmas of the technology. Each person is going to have a unique lens and be able to help reveal not only some of the potential downfalls, but maybe even some solutions. And so, Tina, I'd be very curious to hear from you in terms from the policy side, if you are looking at any specific things in terms of like privacy policy within the US government, or what other, I guess, tech policy hot button issues that you're really tracking right now when it comes to either responsible innovation, preventing harm, or other issues around digital rights, human rights, or privacy.
Sorry, was that for me?
Yes, yes.
Great. Yeah, so, absolutely. I'm tracking everything and anything because I think it impacts both, entities as well as individuals. So in the US, for example, one of the things that has been challenging for quite some time is this notion of privacy, mostly because we are so fragmented. A lot of folks might already know this, but every state in the United States of America has its own law around data breach. So, for 50 states, we've got 50 laws. And if there's a data breach, we're going at it in 50 different states usually. And that's the direction that we started to head in terms of privacy, which makes it really challenging for organizations that want to do the right thing to do the right thing, right? Just because it's so fragmented heavily and there's not really one clear set of regulations or requirements. One of the things that I personally found very interesting is I've been working with a company for about 2.5 years that said they wanted to adopt GDPR, the European Union's data privacy law. And their objective was to take GDPR principles and apply them globally to every single country, which sounds like a great idea. And when I asked the CEO why, he said, oh, why wouldn't we? We should just really respect everybody's privacy. But what's interesting is that GDPR actually is in conflict with many different country laws that are already out there. And so when we look across the board at all of these privacy laws, it's a very sort of tapestry makeup. And privacy is just one aspect, right? We have accessibility, right? So how do people experience the digital sphere? You know, obviously there's really great stories of digital helping folks have experiences that they might not have ever had before, like a paraplegic being able to go skydiving. How amazing is that, right? So there's, you know, really great things happening, but also things not so great because we're not being fully accessible, we're not being fully inclusive. And so really everything from advertising, targeting, privacy, data, branding, to how we're going to be leveraging different aspects of the metaverse for delivery of products and services, guarantees, intellectual property. I tend to look at the end-to-end realm, really trying to understand where is regulation, where regulation ought to go, and where are the gaps? Because I think that really what we're talking about here is not creating a set of laws. It's really easy to say, we need a set of laws to protect us in the metaverse. Thank you very much. What we really need is a framework. We need a framework that is going to create and allow for innovation, right? We need a framework that's going to allow for creativity, but we need a framework that's also going to keep us safe. And trying to find that balance is really what I focused on day in and day out, and understanding in which direction are we swinging in terms of regulation and laws, and how that might impact us, where we actually have opportunities to get it a little bit more balanced and a little bit more right, so we have that risk opportunity equation correct.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. I know that I had a number of discussions, or I had an interview last year with Joe Jerome when he was not working at Meta, but he was at the time working on a lot of state privacy laws. And then I think that none of it really, it was kind of frustrating. He didn't have things that were really going his way, and he eventually went to go work for Meta. So hopefully he's taking his privacy advocate work within the inside. But I still do think that we need a U.S. federal privacy law. That's from my side, you know, in terms of policy. Like, you know, I've saw Julie Brill from Microsoft give testimony to the FTC talking about how, you know, she was advocating from Microsoft's perspective that they would prefer to have all of the U.S. companies following GDPR, because in order to do international business with Schrems 2 and all these other aspects, in order to actually meet the privacy regulations globally, that in order for a lot of businesses in the United States to do international business, then they will need to eventually follow something that is going to look like the GDPR. So, but we still need a U.S. federal privacy law, and I don't think we're close. I think there's consensus, but that's one of the things I'm tracking is just, you know, what's going to take to actually get, you know, something like neuro rights or digital rights embedded into a privacy law that protects our right to identity, right to agency, right to mental privacy. A lot of these neural technologies in XR, is that something that is going to be at the policy level? So yeah, China, I'd love to hear from you in terms of, from your perspective of Microsoft, what type of things you're tracking, either at the global human rights level, the local state laws, or if there's things internally, even within the policies within Microsoft for how to create responsible innovation or other things to be able to prevent harm online.
Thank you so much for, again, for having me. And it's a really great question. Something I should say is I'm speaking on behalf of myself right now, and not specifically Microsoft. And I just have a particular interest in this space. Something that we've been working on recently and enabling creators to do is something called Brianna's Garden that has given me a ton of pause and thought around spaces that we create. For those who aren't familiar with Brianna's Garden, it's an AR experience that the creators of the garden did in partnership with Breonna Taylor's family, specifically Janiyah Palmer, her little sister. And this garden was created as a sacred place for people to leave messages to celebrate those who they lost, and to reflect on really the last few years. It's been a tough one for everyone. And was incredibly powerful. There was just an activation event at Art Basel down in Miami, Florida. We all just got back at the beginning of this week. Is just seeing people interact with, the beginnings of the metaverse in this way, and gathering around really difficult topic. And strangers being willing to step into this vulnerability and sharing a little bit of themselves. And when a message is shared, a new flower is planted in this garden, and so the garden continues to grow. And it opened up conversations around how individuals will be celebrated and their lives, even in the afterlife. And I'm really curious what other thoughts the panel has on that aspect.
And China, that experience itself, it's super powerful. And then we noticed that, we want that experience to be remembered as something sacred. So XRSI team of volunteers actually supplied some of the back-end trust and safety review for those real-time recordings, because it's such a polarizing issue. If somebody had come on and recorded something horrible, we didn't want it to be remembered for that. So we continue to provide, technical back-end support to support that experience. And just real quick, Scott, welcome. I believe you're just a little bit late. If you want to join us in the speaker panel, we did the introductions. If you're able to, please come on over. And here, I'm right here, right next to me is okay, or anywhere else is fine too.
Yeah, there's a pillow available in the end,
thank
too.
you.
Just a follow-on to China's. Oh, go ahead, China.
Oh, there was one thing I wanted to add, Kavya. I apologize. I had a little brain fart there. Yes, partnering with the XR Safety Initiative and reviewing all the messages that come through the garden and what people submit, ensure that it's a curated space that's safe and remains sacred. And it's one of those examples that I think we should be thinking about when we're thinking about the metaverse at scale.
Yeah, and that's a really beautiful experience. It's an augmented reality experience that people should be able to have a chance to check out. So definitely check it out. And I also did an interview with Lady Phoenix since it premiered at Tribeca Film Festival. And it was just a really powerful experience and a way to have almost like a collective ceremony to be able to honor the life of Breonna Taylor. So we have two more people to give statements, and then actually another person, Scott, introduce yourself. So let's start with Scott. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Scott, and make sure that you have your host tools on, you're amplified, and just go ahead and introduce yourself and what you do and your relationship to these larger issues of human rights on the metaverse.
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
You might need to amplify your voice.
Okay, let me amplify here.
There you go.
How does
That's
that
better.
sound? Is that a little better?
That's better. Yep.
Okay,
Yep. Go ahead.
So I represent a very key demographic here because I have actually been here the whole time, but I've been in the audience, and it took me, I guess, a half hour to figure out how to make my way up to the stage. So I I represent a populace that will. Not unlike perhaps Christina's mom or the way my own mom is, of stumbling and bumbling, trying to get on my way through the metaverse. But I'm very, very happy to be here. I've worked with Kavya previously within Second Life, a groundbreaking virtual world environment, which is in many ways the precursor to the metaverse. But my specific interest here is that I've spent my entire professional career in regulatory compliance and financial compliance, starting in 2004 when compliance departments were first being formed. In banks. Prior to that, it was just the bank's lawyer conducting internal investigations if there was money laundering or extremist financing taking place. So I was just an analyst at the time, but sort of starting to wrap my we're trying to figure out how to put a framework around, regulating the financial industry from a security perspective. And then I moved to Facebook and installing the compliance program for their first regulated payments entity, and likewise in Second Life. It was trying to figure out a secure, safe framework for where people could transact safely, know that if to the extent that they needed to engage in commerce, that their money was going to a legitimate place, to the that bad actors weren't exploiting the financial ecosystem, whether it's in a bank or at Facebook or within Second Life. And I think now we're seeing some of the same or similar challenges in the metaverse. And I mean, we a lot of what we want to do, and a lot of our goals in the metaverse, are tied directly to commerce. And then it becomes a question of to what extent does your real world identity, impact your metaverse identity. And if you're relying on financial older world financial institutions, whether they're bank or even perhaps PayPal might be considered an old world financial institution now. How do you reconcile your metaverse identity with your real world identity? How do we make sure that if we want to install financial controls and make sure that this just isn't a Wild West environment, and without having without being in the walled garden, as was mentioned earlier, without having one single control, how do we make sure that we're transacting safely and that we're not going to lose our money? At the same time, how do we do that without giving up personally identifiable information that could potentially harm us in the real world? So that's sort of the problem that I'm trying to help solve, and based on my experience, my prior experience, putting regulatory compliance programs in place around in those other environments, thinking of ways to do that in the metaverse. And I think one of the key differences between the way I would like to see compliance work in the metaverse is have it less be based on your real world identity and perhaps based on your behavior, and have some kind of trusted, some kind of indicator to show that your behavior and your transaction history is trusted, perhaps by the organizations you belong to, the length of certain associations, having a transaction history that is protected, but that you're able to somehow send an external signal to people that you're someone who's reliable and safe to deal with. So figuring out how to answer those challenges will be I think critical for mass adoption, critical for financial inclusion, and for all sorts of other reasons. So that's kind of what I'm passionate about, and I don't have any of the answers right now, but I'm hoping to with all of you on the panel. I'm hoping to work towards that. So thank you very much for letting me be here. I appreciate that.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. And we have two more folks to be able to share some initial thoughts, and we're going to open it up to the audience to sort of have and field different questions. And so there's going to be a raise your hand feature that you could start to think of your questions. And if you do have a question, go ahead, raise your hand, and then we'll start to go through the queue after we get these next two statements. So Lil Bagel, let's go to you next, because I know you're on the trenches of the community, and you're really on the front lines of seeing what's happening face to face. And so I'm very curious to hear what you're focused on, if it's these big, large issues of privacy or human rights or laws, or if it's more of a technical infrastructure for what the communities need to be able to have the most safe experience on the metaverse. And yeah, just curious to hear what you're paying attention to.
For me personally, I'm trying to, in my line of work, I'm really trying to really understand the culture on a really deep level of like who the individual is. You know what I mean? Of who adopted this technology and things like this. There are already around right now as we're currently speaking, living their lives. They've established entire social lives and identities inside of this space, meaning that any decision that's made is going to actively affect them immediately, you know, especially in regards to law. So there's already people who are active in this space who are already entrepreneurs as well, who have created businesses inside of this space outside of the scope of like these bigger entities that are discussing these things. And it's strange to me because you know, I think a lot of them are also kind of intimidated as well, you know, when it comes down to this too. So there's like an intimidation factor where the community kind of feels like you know, maybe they're not big enough to engage, you know what I mean? And that they feel that maybe that voice doesn't necessarily matter so much. And then you have that question as well. I think the community is also a little intimidated with censorship as well. They're already out there enjoying so many things right now. Censorship is also a very big concern for them too. And while everyone understands, like, you know, we got to do some things for safety and things like that too, I think another thing we have to continue keeping in mind moving forward is that there is an active culture being generated right now. It's already there. You know, it's you know, there's a bunch of people who are making social lives with one another. And they have been for years. Right. And so you know, we got to really, I feel like, consider that as well in the table, that there's kind of that already established thing that's been around for quite some time. You know, we are moving forward, but there is some pre-established things that are there that people have already found worked on a community level. I mean, I found much of there's a lot of answers actually to a lot of these questions that have already been found being implemented on a community level, you know, in terms of like, you know, no, there's nothing official happening, but communities have been very good at agreeing that this is how things are going to run, and they're kind of running it like that on the community level, where they've all kind of agreed that this is how it should be, and these are standards that we'll set here, and, you know, we can keep going forward with that. So there's a lot of solutions kind of already out there. They're just not official or written down on paper. So
yeah, I think that as we go through this panel, we actually have a really great cross section from Lawrence Lessig's model, where he sees that there's like these four major contexts under which that you could start to bring about these change. And the broadest context is the culture, which is where the code of conduct and the community driven, where you shift things culturally. You can never really solve everything technologically or everything. You need a combination of all of these things. Human rights kind of fits into that. And then the next layer with the laws, and then the economy, the economic dynamic, which we've had folks talk about, and then underlying technological architecture in the code, which, you know, we got into a little bit of that with Scott talking about sort of the infrastructure of that. But Fox, I'd be very curious to hear for you what your orientation is on this, and what was on your radar in terms of how to bring in either the most human rights, or, you know, to prevent safety, or you know, looking at other aspects of responsible innovation.
Good. Yeah. So I've had the profound opportunity to, you know, help write reports that went to Obama's White House and advising executives at NASA at the highest levels, right? And now I'm also adjunct faculty at Arizona State while having a small business. So a wide breadth of experiences and just, you know, opportunities with others to learn from them and see where we fit in all of this and where I fit in all of this. I wanted to circle back for a second, you know, given all of that experience, understanding throughout all of those levels, our policymakers and our representatives are woefully unprepared and just not aware of how rapidly this technology is moving. And so having guidance, whether it's taxonomies or reports that advise on best practices, which they, you know, most of them don't even understand, and it's very sad. Really a great start. But I also think, you know, part of the reason I love this panel and the folks that are attending it, you all in the audience, is that, you know, we're all thinking about this communally. We've been solving these types of problems as human beings for 10,000 years. Yeah, we're all we're all in this open space, in these open forums that probably resemble meeting out on a plane somewhere, you know, with our huts in the background, and it's not all that different. So these are solvable problems, despite perhaps fetishizing at times the technologies. So me as a business owner, there's an answer. For me as a professor, there's an answer. For me as a technical advisor, there's an answer. And I think probably the simplest thing there is to be human about it. You know, and it's a little hokey, but it's like the reality of it is that humans, the technology is going to change no matter what. There was a time when social media was media. There was a time when, you know, new media meant something, you know, 30 years ago, which is now old media. There's going to be a time when AR and VR, augmented reality and virtual reality, are just reality. It all sandwiches down, right? Like there was a time when the hottest new tech was fire. And so we have this unique opportunity again to reestablish how we treat one another using this technology. And so I guess best practices should always have that human being in mind, and that's the angle that me and company take, and the cohort of people I think on this panel are taking, and I appreciate those insights.
Awesome. Well, we've started to get some of the first questions. I think we're going to move to that, unless there's anybody who has something else they want to add before we move on to the Q&A portion, based upon what's been shared so far. Not, and I'm going to go ahead and Al Most, I'm going to go ahead and put you on air. You want to go ahead and ask your question?
Okay, cool. So it follows on from two topics that I just picked up on. Regulation.
You can come up to the mic over here, right up front.
Ah, okay.
Oh, yeah,
sorry, I didn't realize.
Mic right there. Okay.
Just looked like a stick from the distance. Yeah, so the two issues are regulation, keeping the situation as human as possible, and the thing that I wanted to sort of think, what's an issue that I think we need to be aware of is potential bots being in with the Metaverse in a situation where you have money and you can be sort of manipulated into sort of decisions quite quickly. As algorithms are able to record people's personalities, you're soon enough able to program a bot to be a super personable, charismatic person. And potentially people who are vulnerable might be open to being fleeced in some sort of way, tricked into sort of different types of situations, and maybe some sort of legality as to whether we can have AIs operating in the public space, and how we also keep our information private as to how much money we have connected to our sort of crypto wallets that might be connected to your digital identification, so on and so forth. You know, you could have programmed bots coming into this domain and, you know, accessing information like this, and yeah, I guess it's protocols that have to be written in order to stop that kind of thing happening, but also not allowing it in the smallest form from the very beginning, because what I would think what would happen is somehow in a sort of playful way it's introduced. Say you have an AI bot providing you tickets to a cinema or something, and it starts off in that sort of innocent sort of way, and then the next minute you've got people coming up to you in the street offering you products, you know, that kind of thing. At the moment in here it's very like freeing because we're not connected to our money. There's no connection to status because of the inability to be able to purchase items in here. So yeah, that's basically where I wanted to take the conversation.
Awesome. Any thoughts from the panel? Sure, a quick thought, and feel free to jump in. Well, the quick thought is, yeah, this idea of context and from contextual integrity theory of privacy from Helen Nissenbaum says that, you know, you can't just sort of blanket eliminate different aspects. It's all about context under which it's used. And so I think, you know, we have to see, like you were saying, if there's a context that makes sense for AI bots. But yeah, if the context is that they're trying to rip you off or trying to extort you or, you know, manipulate you, then that's where the context of the bot is probably going to be in question. There's probably going to be a lot of useful things, but also things that are not so useful and more evil. But also, I don't know, like, I guess I have faith that there'll be at least a little bit more time for us to not be completely fooled by, bots that are not human, because we don't have artificial general intelligence. But I don't know, is there other thoughts that people have in terms of what we need to take care of? Yeah, go ahead, Christina.
Yeah, so I think that this is a really great use case and a great example of the need to govern, right? And at what points do we govern? I think, one of the things that I would say, or I guess I was thinking about as you were speaking, is, it's really great to have innovation. It's really great to have creativity. But at the moment that we recognize that something is viable, that it actually has value, that it has potential, I think at that point we actually have to start deciding to govern, right? We actually have to say, now we're going to govern. And what that means is creating that framework, if you will, right? Creating the framework of what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, what are the risks, what are the opportunities, and where do we, right, as a society want to come down on this issue. And when I say society, that includes individuals, it includes entities like businesses, it includes governments, et cetera.
Maybe we shouldn't use the word govern then. Because if we're going to communicate the idea of it being open to public opinion, we shouldn't use words that are currently used to oppress people and to silence people. I think
That's fair.
You know what I mean? I think in a new state of terms, I think it could, using terms like government and that kind of a system, you quite quickly fall into a similar trap into what we're experiencing at the moment worldwide, where it's the rulers versus the ruled. And I think it should be open to consensus. Obviously, it has to be managed in a way so then it's, certain things are applicable, but I don't know. I'm just saying, just specifically the word. I understand that things have to be regulated, but that's much my point about how we can detach from current scenarios as well that are going on in society.
Well, when I say govern, I don't necessarily mean regulation right away. In fact, I work with entities to try and avoid that. I actually work with businesses that believe that they should not actually have a lot of regulation forced upon them, which is why a good number of them are choosing to adopt digital policy internally to their entities and to their organizations to show that they can be good global citizens, do things the right way, and that we don't necessarily need rules. A lot of times rules are inappropriate, they're wrong size, they're about 20 years behind where we are as a society from a digital transformation perspective. And so, Senator Warner said a few minutes ago, he's considered, the advanced kid on the block in terms of technology, so that's obviously not the right group of people to trust in terms of, governing for us. But that's why I'm saying I think that it's actually has to be a larger group. And I'm not going to claim that I have the right answer in terms of what that makeup looks like. What I am saying, though, is that we do have to govern, which means that we do have to decide who makes decisions and who provides input and how that gets done. And it could be that it's a model that we haven't encountered yet, right?
Well, you could easily just have polling stations within the spaces, quite easily set up a little space within the popular areas, where you can vote your decision on certain types of things. But I think things have to be agreed upon before that happens, so then the way it does have to be chosen by a select group of people. I think it should be a broad range of people with an understanding about different social cultures. Obviously the economist guys, they need to be involved in this. There's just so many people that need to be involved. And I think it already is a situation where so many people are involved. I've got a lot of hope for it. I just feel like there's certain things that I am worried about, and it's maybe just a few things that haven't been mentioned. For instance, the thing that I was saying about, potential bots and being able to characterize the human sort of behaviors enough, and we can be fooled into thinking they're a friend or something. I don't know.
I think that's perfect. Yeah, if I could add to what Christina is saying, and then, this is something, Christina, you and I have discussed a couple of times, is we have a new opportunity to utilize these Web 3.0 driven technologies. So one of the technologies that we are going to lean on is DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization, that allows for citizens' participation to build these frameworks. So we're not just collecting these multidisciplinary folks to build frameworks and standards. We're going to lean on a specific DAO model so that the people could choose to select the controls that they want the metaverse organizations to assume as a self-governance until there is some kind of a governance model or regulations come into effect. But at the same token, we'll advise the regulator to be not so heavy-handed, but more like an innovation-driven. Even yesterday when we were hearing from eSafety Commissioner, she specifically said, we want organization to succeed. And so it's all about enabling innovation, but at the same time, that's the role of MRC as well, is to lean on these new technologies. The other question that you asked about economy, I think Scott is the best person prepared to answer that, is the new protocols that will require to rely and trust the virtual economy or virtual goods is something that Scott worked on with me second lifetime as a chief compliance officer, and currently now we are together advising two major entities, UCC as well as UNIDROIT, to literally lay down the law of the land for virtual goods itself. Scott, I don't know if you have something to add to it.
I don't know if my mic is on, but I'd like to say something. I don't want.
Oh, wait, hold on. Hold on. If you
Sorry.
raise your hand, PPG, then we'll put you in the queue.
Sorry.
There's a queue. And if I know that Brian also raised your hand, maybe Brian, if you want to go ahead, if you had something that you wanted to share as well.
Yeah, just to the earlier point about how do we solve AI bots that want to rip you off. I mean, I think it's also important to not overly mystify the metaverse medium. When so many of these interactions that we're talking about are really three-dimensional versions of things that we already have, right? We already have spear phishing today. We already have bots, and we have ways of dealing with them. We have good security protocols, wise behavior when interacting with people digitally. We have reCAPTCHAs, right, to verify if someone's a bot or not. So we're talking about really making a three-dimensional version of a reCAPTCHA here to authenticate identity. And so the medium offers a great number of unique tools, obviously suggest ways of interacting and developing rules interactively that might not work in a two-dimensional medium, but many of these problems have really already been solved, or at least we have a model to work with solving them here.
Yeah, but there's
That's a
always
great point.
criminals that are going to want to try and work a way around it. That's the thing, you've got to have that criminal mind to make you learn some sort of loophole. They
Yeah, when we have that now, right? Well, that's everything. That's human nature. Is point counterpoint, weapon countermeasure to that. This is just a new medium for that interaction to continue.
Yeah,
Thank you, Al. Al, I think we have other people that have some questions. I think we're going to move on. So thank you for your question. PPG, if you want to go ahead, you are now on air.
Oh, thank you. Do I go here or just talk?
Yeah, if you stand up there, that just helps. And if for all the panelists, if you have something that you'd like to say, if you also raise your hand, that will also help me know the queue for folks who'd like to respond.
You guys have amazing points, and I'm so glad you guys are, challenging. And there's so many amazing people in the YouTube universe that don't tell you, but ask you and frame things in questions to make us think without dictating. I'm not going to push Russell Brand, but I've seen it. He's so kind, and he phrases things. So not to tell you, but ask you quality questions to make you think for yourself. And so many amazing questions we all need to ask. This is all new territory for all of us. And instead of telling people, it's better to phrase things in questions and make us all think all the challenges we're going to have to deal with. This is a whole new platform. It's just lots of questions we need to ask ourselves. And that's all I want to say. And instead of saying govern, I mean, those are words. And, some people associate govern as control. And some people, so it's crazy, how we have to really process and say, and this is insane. Not insane, it's a bad word. There you go. It is a new realm where we're going to have to I have to think about all these concepts. I think it's great, and I think it's also going to challenge the heck out of everybody. That's all. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Do we have any? Feel free to, if you have other questions or comments, go ahead and raise your hand. Do we have any reactions or comments of folks of other stuff that's come up so far? Well, Bagel, go ahead.
Yeah, I just thought that it was really interesting that he brought that up anyways. I know, first off, very passionate individual. You know, I know you're obviously involved in this space very much. But I wanted to make sure that, you know, the point wasn't missed right there, which is that, like, it is new territory. We are moving forward with this sort of thing. But I do also want to stipulate that, like, as new as it seems, this is actually something that has a lot of standards that have been set for a long time. I mean, the game industry is very much responsible for a lot of the modern technologies of protecting people and stuff like that already. So we do kind of have an idea or some models based off of what has already been set up, and other people are already kind of relating to the metaverse, right? Which is like, now they're like, wait, was massive multiplayer online games, wasn't that just the metaverse the whole time? You know what I mean? And that's we kind of already have these models already that we can kind of look back in the past. And so with that, it gives me a lot of confidence that, like, before people get too overwhelmed with how new it is, there are systems that have worked in the past.
Nice. And if you have more questions, I'm going to take actually an opportunity to follow up with a point that Rochelle made earlier. Rochelle, you said that, well, I know that Meta has the responsible innovation principles, but then there was like 10 responsible innovation dimensions, and there wasn't any mention of those dimensions at the Facebook or the Connect 2021. But I heard you tonight sort of go back to some of those different dimensions, the ones that you're focusing in on. What was interesting to me, at least, was that these dimensions have different trade-offs for that. You can't do all of them perfectly, so you have to kind of decide how to negotiate, you know, what to focus on. So I'd just be curious to hear that tonight you mentioned that you're focusing on 4 of those dimensions, and how do you sort out through the different trade-offs of those things as you start to work through that?
Hold on. I think it's a taxonomy question, right? You talk about dimensions, priorities, and whatnot. I think when we identified those 4, it was based on some of the lessons that we've learned and some of the sort of pre-existing conditions that we know. We know issues like privacy are evergreen. We know issues like safety and integrity are evergreen. We know that equity and inclusion and accessibility is something that has been with us, that we want to both sort of as a company and as a partner to others as we build together want to address. And so it's less of a trade-off and more of, you know, what can we learn from what has gone on before, and then how do we approach it differently as we build for the metaverse, whether that's via sort of relationships like the XR Association, where we're looking at our peers, whether it's via, again, supporting convenings like this, where literally I've sat here and listened for an hour because there's so much that we don't know. So I would put the question to the rest of the group and ask how they prioritize. We are just, again, taking lessons that we've learned in battles that we continue to try to address thoughtfully. But I mean, we could have picked 10 other things, right? And so everyone talks about the way to consume the elephant. It's one bite at a time. And I think that's what we need to continue to do. It should not be built by, again, any one company. It's going to take all of us. And so that's what we do.
Nice. Yeah, and it's probably a good time to maybe start to wrap up. If I'd love to hear maybe some closing thoughts. We had a first round, and then we some questions, and maybe if we go through and just, you know, as we move forward, what do you think is the next steps for what you're either focusing on or what the larger community needs to focus on? So maybe we'll just go down the line again and start with you, Christina, in terms of, you know, what do you think needs to happen next with trying to get to where we need to get with all this stuff on the metaverse?
Well, first of all, I think one of the things that everybody here has said at one point today or this week is a lot more listening.
Christina, you can megaphone?
Thank you. Somehow my megaphone went away. I think the very first thing really is to continue the conversations and really have the broad understanding of perspectives from everybody. And so I want to iterate that. I think one of the best things about this week has been really meeting so many different people and getting different perspectives, understanding what everybody's struggling with, asking questions, and also offering up that perspective. This morning we had a wonderful roundtable with some breakout sessions around data classification. And I think, to get to some kind of solution, what we really need to do is obviously talk and exchange ideas, but we also have to listen and start formulating some ideas. And so I feel like just continuing the path of communications, which sounds so cliche, but I think having these types of forums, having individual conversations, and being open just to hearing different perspectives and also, trigger aspects, et cetera, I think are critical. So for me, at least, personally, I'm looking forward to listening a lot and through the MRC, really trying to take those ideas that we're hearing from everybody and morph them into advisories, into things that matter so that we can start building that foundation for going forward.
Nice, thank you. China, you have some closing thoughts?
Yes, I second everything Christina just said, and what I was thinking about was it really does take a community. This is a space that all of us are going to engage in, and some aspect of our lives are going to be impacted by. So, shout out to the XR safety team for bringing us all together, and I hope the conversation continues.
Very cool. Well, Bagel.
For me, I just it's been an honor first off to be invited out here to speak, and it's been a lot of fun listening to everybody's perspectives. There's a lot of perspectives I didn't have prior, have heard and now have now, which is really awesome. But thinking about the future on how, like, building off of that community involvement that you were just talking about there, China, which is that there is a grassroots of individuals that I really want to highlight that have done a lot to make sure that all of these spaces are kind of in that area where it's now ready to push. So they ended up setting lots of standards, and we're building up a lot from what the community has already kind of put out there. And you guys already know them. You used to call them the gamer. Those people are no longer, individuals that are just playing games all day long. They've grown up, and now they've taken what they've learned and they're pushing it for these remote technologies that you're seeing now. And I've seen words like gamified being used as a derogatory term to describe something in the metaverse. And I look at that term and I'm so confused. And to me, that means this inclusion of individuals. That's all gaming has ever been, is an inclusion of individuals on a mass scale in a multiplayer experience where everyone has kind of gotten together and shared experiences. And that continues to happen every day, even now. I mean, it's happening right here as we speak, So just thought I'd say that.
And as a lifelong gamer myself, I could certainly appreciate that perspective. Though I am more of a solo RPG kind of a guy, so not a massive multiplayer gamer. But still, the point's well taken. Just my takeaway is something that Scott said in talking about how we can build credibility for ourselves in the metaverse based on our transaction history. And it makes me think of a perhaps more boring and non-profitable use of the non-fungible token in a way of maybe verifying real-world transactions and bringing them into, or the physical world, bringing them into the digital. Say I'm a licensed attorney in Illinois. I get an assigned number when I'm sworn in. That's my bar number. Maybe there's a way to verify that for me, that I am a licensed attorney in the real world here, through the use of an NFT. That you could hover over my name, and if I've elected to show it, you could see that. Then maybe within the metaverse, there's other licensing or certification regimes. I've gone, with XRSI, I've taken their safety, course, or I've taken their privacy course, and now here I have an NFT that shows that I've done that, and now you see that, and that will help build my credibility. So I think there's ways to maybe use what is, this very popular way to, try to make money, right now with NFTs, and look at it in a way to do what Scott said, which is, build up your own virtual credibility. So thank you for that seed planted for that idea, Scott.
Yeah, real briefly, I think I'd just add that I think one thing that's come out of this is that, before we rush to pass rules, there's some talk about language there, how we describe the rules that we're laying down. Before we rush to make hard and fast rules or even laws, first we need to know what we're talking about. We need to know what we mean by metaverse, which we've agreed that we don't have that shared frame of reference yet. But let's start with norms, and I think that's kind of one way of encapsulating the conversation that we had about rules, which is that let's begin with what are the norms that we want to guide our behavior. Obviously, inclusion and privacy, things of accessibility, and safety in terms of financial transactions, things of that nature. And then let's see how those norms shape what we develop. And once things take a little bit more solid form, then we can talk about more specific and enforceable rules. But let's start with basics.
Nice. Fox.
Yeah, just I think one of the things that keeps popping up in my head as I kind of look out at this crowd and impressed at the folks that have decided to listen to all us boring folks talk about safety or the lack of it. I think there's an extremely powerful opportunity right now if we're able to check our egos at the door and allow as many people into this conversation as possible, because I think we've been stacking rules and gates so high now that folks are fairly dissatisfied throughout the world as to how things are being run. And if we can create new ways of running these things that promulgate out from this virtual environment into the real world, there may be a grand affordance, XR or AR or VR, that we're not fully aware of just yet. So I guess the last thing that I'd like to say is I'd love to see more children involved, right, in this conversation, because this is going to hit them right in the face, and that would be a powerful insight that we don't currently have.
Kavya.
Yep. So I think I agree with all of you, and I think in the coming days, the biggest thing that I think XRSI is going to tackle is to, of course, there is the mission of MRC that we are going to commence, and already shared that we're going to issue our first advisory that will be directed to local governments as well as multiple stakeholders. But one of the very first aspects that we are interested in establishing, just like we did 2 years ago when people were fighting on Twitter, we issued a special edition for what is XR. So this whole idea of what is the metaverse, we made an attempt with that research paper, and now with very much soliciting all of the input, one of the first thing that we are going to do in 2022 issue another baseline special publication around what is the metaverse. There's some parallel conversation as well to creating a certification for all, so that we can onboard people into the metaverse with an understanding of what is the metaverse, what is a decentralized organization. So once you take that certification, you can say, hey, I took the certification from XRSI, and I need basic online safety, hygiene, and these are the new terminology of the creation of the internet. That parallel certification plus just laying out a common consensus, and we would hear back from people if they're not satisfied. Common understanding, shared understanding, main focus, or certification, guidance, baseline, economy standards that we'll put out, and then see how that is there to create more accountability, to bring exactly like we did stakeholders to the table, and then just sort of having honest information with respect to data classification or what are the potential risks that we have not accounted for, so that by the time technology matures, it's not too late, or those things are not baked in that are being, let's say, underrepresented minority or citizens from geographics. That's going to be our focus in 2022, but mostly just conducting research, putting knowledge out there, and
Thanks, Kavya. Rochelle, any final thoughts?
I think I gave them. It's funny when just in terms of listening, I'm looking out at the folks that are joining, and it's just very slowly the crowd sort of the more people came in, and I think about one of our priorities around sort of like equity and inclusion and accessibility, and like we'd like to think these are early days, but there's so much that has happened already. I think one of my personal focuses is to make sure that as many people that desire to can be included in these conversations as early as possible. And we have lots of work to do there. So again, we'll continue to support convenings like this, but for me personally, my focus is that sort of like an inclusive piece and finding out how folks can build with us who don't necessarily look like us in the room right now.
Nice. And Scott, are you still there?
Yep. Oh yes, I'm still here.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, any final thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I think this was a very learning experience for me, and I think everybody else involved. And I'm just, looking forward to getting to work. And I really appreciated the exchange in the audience from that. I forgot his name, but the audience member who had mentioned the bots and being, slightly allergic to the governance term and understanding, moving forward, understanding that perspective, and what Lil Bagel said about, this is not, it's not as if we're stepping onto the moon here. I think we're in the metaverse. We're kind of, iterating on things that people have worked on in the past, and a lot of things that communities have problems communities have already sort of organically solved, and then it's a matter of figuring out, okay, how do we make this work for everybody? I mean, we're supposed to be creating a better world, so how do we do that? And going into that with our eyes open, I think is critical. But yeah, thank you, Kavya, for all of your work this week and putting all of this together as well. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure everybody else does as well.
Yeah, and for my part, just some final thoughts is just that the thing that I'm looking for is a different discussion that happens with human rights and digital rights, and how those things like neuro rights, again, the things that I think that are most important for the neuro rights are the right to identity. So the fact that as we exist online, there's going to be entities that are out there trying to record different aspects of our identity. And so to what degree do we have control over those inferences that are being made in real time, that are contextually aware? And then the next point is their mental privacy. So as we have more and more invasive technologies, to what degree do we have the ability to maintain the integrity of our private mental thoughts as technology gets better and better, be able to read both our physiological and biometric and even eventually, potentially even our brain waves to kind of like decode not only what we're thinking, but our intentional actions. It's on a roadmap that it's only going to get more and more intimate. So at what point do you cross the threshold where it's too far? So I think that the issues of neuro rights with both the identity and mental privacy, and then the final one was the agency, and what degree do they have such a good model of our digital twin that can start to nudge our behaviors to the point that undermines our rights to agency. I think those three main neuro rights. So there's other neuro rights in terms of algorithmic bias and equitable access, but I think the three that are related to those aspects of identity, mental privacy, and agency are the ones that are probably the most urgent in the sense that there's no U.S. federal privacy law that kind of is protecting us with these types of neuro rights. So what needs to happen there? Do they need to make some sort of declaration of human rights? We need to pass a U.S. federal privacy law to be able to ensure that our time within XR technologies are the most safe as we can, and that we're not going to have ourselves undermine our identity, agency, or mental privacy. And just for me personally, I do the Voices of VR podcast and facilitate a number of different conversations. Some of the hot topics that came up in previous sessions were stuff around homomorphic encryption and differential privacy. To what degree can those different types of technological solutions start to provide solutions, and what are the other aspects of culture and laws and the economy that are also going to play into all of that as well, and to really come up with responsible innovation frameworks that are integrating aspects of privacy frameworks that are helping both companies and developers and the larger industry navigate these various different moral dilemmas and these trade-offs and how to create the most safe online existence. And And Kavya, congratulations for a pretty epic week and put all this together with XRSI. Now I'll pass it over to you if you have any other final thoughts.
Thank you so much, Ken. And final thoughts is really, if you made it into this metaverse as we are gathering together, I'd love to have you gather around right on stage, and we can take a final picture to mark this historic monumental moment that we have our first virtual citizenship forum. I'm going to pass the baton to Christina, who is basically going to continue this tradition for over the years. We will leverage MRC, Metaverse Reality Check, to continue these conversations, and whatever is the frequency will guide Christina. But honestly, what should people do now that we have this MRC? How can they engage with us?
Absolutely. So, first of all, let me say that I would love for everybody here to hold us accountable. I think we're making a commitment to everybody, but make sure you hold us accountable to that commitment. So first and foremost, let's stay true to the mission of what we're here to do. Let's not forget that. And yes, we'll continue to have conversations. We'll continue to, converse. We'll continue to listen, but also hold us accountable for doing things. I think Kavya has always done that. I think XRSI has a strong history of doing that. I think the MRC is just a continuation of that institution, if you will. And so going forward, if you'd like to join us, you can certainly start following us on Twitter. We are releasing our website. So, if you're interested in formally getting involved, there's lots of different ways. You don't have to spend hours and hours away. But surely if you'd like to spend hours away with us, we'll take that too. You can get involved as full-on member, for a lot of organizations or individuals who want to contribute fiscally. There's a Patreon option. But honestly, I think just giving us your ideas, your thoughts, and your support with whatever background, experience, and knowledge you have is really what we're after, because again, this is a board, it's a global board, right? So beyond just this group right here, beyond just North America, wherever we might be, it's intended to be a global board for and by citizens. And so hold us accountable for doing that, for remembering all of the perspectives that we might sometimes forget, and staying true to the underlying mission. But definitely join us. On the screen, you have ways to do that, and I look forward to working with you and really making great things happen.
All right. And we want to take a photo and then have some mingling time.
Yes. So if people want to just join right here, facing, I believe, our two deities in the ether. There is Marco and there is Tim. They will help us take a picture of this historic moment. And I invite every one of you to just sort of congregate around here, facing them. Marco, if you can join us, that would be great too. Anyone else